because you know through some experience that there will always come a point where, because it pushes or pulls on you, you will do something, say something, go through something that you wish to God after you had done so you had not done. It doesn't miss the mark to say that, and you'll see this for yourself if you really pay attention tonight, there's really only one regret that a human being has. And in the end, it's the fact that there came a moment where, for a brief flash, there was a choice, and the choice was co-opted by a consciousness that decided not to meet that moment, but to avoid it. To do anything but go through what stood before you as a possibility that was literally ripped from you, because in the appearance of that possibility, as will always appear with every new possibility, a pain that you didn't know what to do with, that threatened you, that would you go through with that new possibility, something would happen unknown and you can't deal with it now, you'll deal with it later. Procrastination is a form of pain produced by fear. And as you'll see as we go through this, and I'm not adequate to it, I realize increasingly, the unbelievable, extraordinary gifts that an individual is given repeatedly, where there isn't a moment in his or her life, not a moment, where there isn't unfolding in them some kind of revelation about the consciousness that they have entered into that moment with, that for their willingness to meet that consciousness as it is given to them and shown to them, to transcend the prison of the pain that that consciousness lives in all the time, but that is forever blaming something outside of it for locking itself in there. So I have a story. I didn't have time to draft it into actors. That would have been my preference. So I have to play all 92 parts. No, there's just 2 parts to it. So here's 2 brothers, and they live in separate parts of town, but they're very close. And comes a call from the one brother, and he says, "Hey, bro, can you get over here and help me?" "Well, what's wrong?" I said, "I don't want to. It's just a lot better. A picture's worth 1,000 words. If you would just come over, everything will be clear to you." "Well, is it bad?" He said, I really need you." "All right." He jumps up, goes in his car. He walks in, and there's his brother. You've seen the hospital pictures. His leg is up in the air, and his arm is up like this, and his head is in a cast like that. And his brother goes, "Good grief, Brad, what the heck happened to you? I thought you told me you just had a toothache." "I did," said Brad. "Well, how did you end up like this? That's crazy." He said, "Well, I couldn't stand the thought of the pain of going to see the dentist, so I just started taking lots and lots of aspirin." "So, and what?" "Well, all that aspirin upset my stomach something so fierce that I started drinking lots of Pepto-Bismol." "Geez, Brad, that sounds bad, but it's nothing like what I'm looking at." He said, "Yeah." He said, that was a week or so ago, and I drank so much of it that I lost my appetite and started really feeling weak. By the end of the week, I barely could stand up. Come on, man." "Well, so I thought to entice my appetite that I'd go to my favorite food court, the one that's on the 3rd floor there at the mall, where there's so many good little places to grab bites to eat. I just love that place." He said, all right, I'm still with you, but you haven't explained why I'm seeing you in this body cast. Well, he said, I guess I got so weak, he said, that as I was going up the escalator, by the time I reached the top of the second story, I fainted. And I rolled all the way down the stairs to the bottom. And then they had to come and send me the paramedics. He said, and that's how I wound up in this body cast. Let me understand this, he said. The pain of going to the dentist took you through a series of events that now you're in a body cast full of pain? Yeah. End of story. Except his brother says, wouldn't it have been a lot easier just to go to the dentist? Wouldn't it have been? What do you think his brother said? Of course it would. But it hurt so much to go see him. Do you think you're not like Brad in this story? Do you ever wonder how in the name of God you wind up in fights with people, worried sick, anxious over tomorrow, hating yourself for some form of weakness? In the end, there's really only one weakness, and we will never understand the nature of that weakness until we do one thing, and that is we have to understand what it means to not just meet the pain, but go beyond it. No one that you know knows what it means to go beyond the psychological pain, including you. Because as we all know pretty well, the way that person, Brad, ended up in so much pain. I'm asking you, how did he end up in so much pain? Trying to avoid pain. If he had agreed, now this is important, if he'd agreed not to meet the pain, but to meet his fear of the pain, then he would have understood the pain and realized that there is no getting around that kind of pain, because the fear of it goes everywhere with him as it goes with you everywhere you go. Into every conversation, into every moment alone, into every moment where you're looking downstream to figure out what's going to happen, or looking back and regretting what took place. At the root of all of that activity, there is something inside of this consciousness that absolutely cannot, will not do what it is asked to do in the appearance of the very pain that it avoids. That's what we're going to look at together. Let's bring up the first key lesson, please. I've summarized it. Please don't throw it away because it isn't immediately apparent to you. It reads, the fear of pain, the pain of fear. See how they feed one another, and your liberation draws near. The fear of pain, the pain of fear. See how they feed one another, and your liberation draws near. You cannot separate the fear of your pain from the pain that you fear. End of story. But we don't understand that much, do we? So, let's take a little breath. I'm going to ask you a question. On Wednesdays, we have an interactive class where I involve you in the room, and of course all of you who are joining us online, so that we can examine together what turns out to be a host of different responses to a question, only to find out that all of these responses to the one question have so much in common as to be inescapable in terms of recognizing this is a single consciousness that meets every moment in exactly the same way, but that we have different moments in which those times come, so that by our conditioning environment and so forth and so on, we all think we meet different moments, but we're about to see that we don't meet different moments, but rather there's something in us that creates these moments that we don't recognize yet as being so. So, simple question. To fear is to suffer. Yes or no? Out loud. Are you sure? To fear is to suffer, yes? Then how can fear protect you from any form of pain it tries to avoid? Let's do that again, shall we? To fear is to suffer, yes or no? Then how can fear protect you from any form of pain that it tries to avoid? It, out loud? Well, I'm confused now. Wink, wink. If you know that fear can't protect you from pain because the pain is inherent in the fear itself, then why in the name of God do you look to fear of this pain to tell you how to be free of the pain that you fear? Can you not see that is an absolute contradiction in a consciousness that cannot see itself as it goes through that consistent iteration? Yes or no? Talk's over. Could be, but we're going to go on and we're going to do some discovery, some investigation. But I want you to understand something before we get into this material. By the time we're done, most of, if not all of you, are going to feel pain if you don't already feel pain. If you will attend to your own experience as I prove to you what you need to see about your relationship with pain, then you'll be able to use the pain you feel while I'm talking to prove the very point of the talk. You'll see in yourself that something in you is going, you know what, I failed here, I'm the worst, I didn't do that, I'm not willing, what's wrong with me? You will hear all of the attending voices connected to the inescapable resistance to having revealed to you the truth of what you have yet to realize about your relationship with pain. And what is your relationship with pain? Honestly, what is it? I don't know anything about it. I think I do, because pain is always telling me why I'm suffering. It looks to the past. It calls its perception of the present moment, its infallible view of things, and it looks to the future. And it as you're doing it, you are in pain, because you wouldn't be looking into the past or into the future if it weren't pain pushing you to escape the pain of that consciousness in the moment. Do you see it a little bit with me? So if you'll be attentive to what we talk about and what goes through you, especially as we get further into this material, because this can be challenging. How many of you love challenges? Yeah. You say, well, let me hear the challenge first. Then I'll decide if I'm on board with the challenge. So we're going to work for a moment here to create a list. I'm going to start in the room. I've got at least 10 different answers to the question that I'm going to prime the pump with. And as always, I'm going to ask the men and women out there joining us to contribute to this list that we will build and then examine, having to do with the very subject of this pain we don't understand. I just have to bring in one last thought before I cover the list with you. If you're going someplace and you go beyond some signpost, and then 10 minutes, 10 days, 10 months later, you see the exact same signpost, did you go beyond that signpost? Did you? See, you and I think that going beyond pain is dealing with it so that we don't have it anymore. And what we deal with always are the conditions that we blame our suffering on, and believe that if we can just wrestle this into some kind of shape and get it to be the way we need it to be so we don't suffer anymore, that we've gone beyond the pain. But the pain is never in the condition that we deal with. The pain is inherent in a consciousness that believes it's responsible for dealing with the pain that it blames the moment on. And until we understand that, we will never really recognize, with God as my witness, that you and I are the most extraordinary creature in the world, that you and I are created to go beyond pain every moment that it appears. And you'll see as we go through this, in one respect, there's no moment in which a certain kind of pain isn't being produced in this consciousness, in this body, because this consciousness and this body is forever being asked to transcend itself, to go through what creation beckons it to do, so that in going through that creation, there is a necessary death, a necessary passing, a constant resistance in this consciousness itself. And it isn't until we understand the nature of that constant resistance that is the source of all our psychological pain that it becomes even feasible, possible to even consider what I'm describing to you. And I want you to understand, this is a description, not something to be imagined as yours, but to be worked on and worked on and worked on until you actualize the idea itself in your own life. Then you will be the living laboratory in which you discover that you are created to go beyond the appearance of any psychological pain that appears. Any psychological pain. You'll have a magic wand. How many of you have always wanted to be a fairy, Charlie? You'll have a magic wand. Here's the list. At what point in your ongoing relationships with friends, family, places, or daily problems that you meet along the way do you reach your tipping point that seems inescapable, that telltale moment where it feels impossible to take one step further, let alone carry the weight of that pain with you? How many of you understand this simple idea, this idea of that I just hit the tipping point? Yes? So let me prime the pump, then I'm going to bring you in. I want you to tell me where it is in your relationships, blah, 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 you come to that tipping point. And by the way, how many of you reach tipping points multiple times a day? Yeah. So here's a few places that tipping point. Someone challenges your authority or any other precious image you may have of yourself. Yes? Any sudden, unexpected delay on your way to someplace you want to get to. Is that not a tipping point? That's called road rage, incidentally. Seeing some form of injustice in the world. Just turn on the TV, just walk down the street. Number 4, catching someone being dishonest with you. Isn't that a tipping point? All right, now, I have more, but I'm going to open it to the room and to the list out there. Who has and will share a tipping point that they have seen in themselves? Hands, please. Debbie.
When things don't work out the way
The minute something doesn't work out the way I've imagined it, tipping, pain. Yes. Who else? Deborah.
Getting a bill that I already paid. Getting another bill in the mail.
Getting a duplicate bill for something that I already paid. Okay. Who else? John.
When I can't seem to understand what someone is trying to explain to me.
Basically, the tipping point is the moment when impatience reaches its zenith and zoom I go, off I go. Chris.
When somebody doesn't understand.
God help anybody that doesn't understand Chris. Even Eric was alluding to that, wasn't he, before class? Yeah. Over on the board, Denise, when I start pushing someone to get what I want. Well, the tipping point is actually the moment where you feel like you have to push someone. And when you push and they don't obey, then you really hit there's several tipping points, aren't there? Randall, tailgaters. Okay. Patricia.
When I'm waiting for a long time for a business to come on the line, and then
I actually wrote that one down myself. Being asked to hold on and then being disconnected after 30 minutes. Boom. Yes or no? Tipping point. Leah.
When someone tells me how much and there's no room for discussion.
If someone just lays it down and I want to even suggest another possibility and I'm shut down so we can just agree, anytime I feel like I've been shut down on the spot, that's a tipping point for me. Who else, please? Wayne.
When
We've said that. Anytime people don't do as I want them to do, I start a slow simmer that turns into a boil. Over on the board, tipping point. Agreeing to do something I don't want to do. That's an interesting tipping point, but that is, isn't it? Because here I am and I don't want to do it, but for the image of myself, I say yes. And so doing that causes the resentment to build and to build. And when it finally builds the tipping point of blaming you for what I agreed to do, resenting you. Leah, another one.
When I'm having a meal or a conversation with someone and they keep looking at their phone.
Sitting at the table with someone who never bothers to look at me sitting at the table because they're too busy on their phone. Yes, of course, all that's too. Chica.
Invalid password.
Oh, that's exactly right. She said, invalid password. Oh, mother of pearl. Because you know when it says invalid password that you're going to have to jump through 47,000 hoops, most of which you don't remember how you made them to begin with. So the pressure starts to build because I want to get it done, and now this idiot computer and the password problem is standing in front of me, and it's all somebody else's fault, right, Chica? Over on the board, robo scam callers. Well, one day with God as my witness, you will have such a new understanding of the pain. Because what is the tipping point? I'm going to keep going with you. What is the tipping point? What causes that tipping point? When the pain gets to a threshold that I cannot deal with anymore. I can't think my way through it. I don't want to. I just want this gone. Yes or no? We're going to get into it in more detail. Paul, when it seems like I'm the only one who cares to make sure something goes off in the right way. Steve, when every light on a 10-mile journey turns red. In the room, John.
Tell me when people tell me I'm slow.
John said, when people tell me that I'm slow, but you shouldn't argue with the truth, man. If you even suggest that there's something in my character that isn't the way I've imagined it, I reach a tipping point. Yes or no? Over to the board. Gloria, when I answer the phone and I get no response, only dead silence. You should be grateful for that, I might add. Feeling patronized. That'll set you off, won't it? This is what we call being triggered. Betrayal of trust, that's a significant one. Anytime that you feel or sense that someone is being dishonest with you, are you not brought to that tipping point? Yes or no? In the room, John, Roger, someone calling me by the wrong name really sets me off.
When there's too much to do and I don't know where to start.
Anytime I'm looking at a list that, by the way, I made, and I look at it and I start to feel stress and pain and anxiety because who's the idiot that agreed to do all of this? Did I fill it in pretty good? Yeah, I think so too. On the board, Lori, the moment I face a pain of accepting an image of me that feels less than or the problem, the tipping point, and this is a little bit subtle, what she's saying is suddenly I see something about myself, and when I see it, it brings up a certain pain that says, I don't want to see that anymore. That is a very distinct tipping point, and one that we're going to get to in quite depth in this talk. Anybody else in the room? The list is filling up. Ellen.
When people are dismissive of me.
Oh my God, don't be dismissive of Ellen or anyone else. If someone's dismissive of you, what does it mean? I reach the tipping point the moment I even suspect someone is rejecting me. In that moment, I am full of fire because who are they to do this to me? Don, when I go out of my way to help someone and they complain I don't do enough, I have a perfect solution for you, Don. Never mind. You'll understand that. Anybody else? Because I'm going to go on. Deborah, one more.
Dealing with incompetent people.
Dealing with incompetent people. Really?
Yes.
Yeah. Isn't it amazing that I am probably the only competent person on the planet? Yeah. And then on the board, invalid assumptions. That's a big one. Somebody makes an assumption about a character or something, and I'm gone. Shoshana, passive aggressiveness or gaslighting. Yeah. Passive aggressiveness means that that person drops into a conversation with me, some veiled form of attack. So anytime I feel attacked, I go on the defensive, and I'm always on the defensive, by the way, because I'm always in some form of fear that someone will mention something about my character in a passive-aggressive way, and I'm going to go off, yes or no. All right, that's pretty good. We got a ton of those. Now, with everything that we just read, can you see that most all of us have some form or another of these various trigger points, these places where we go off, where the pain happens, yes or no?
Yes.
So now, transition, nice deep breath. What do all of those moments, those trigger points, every last one of them, they have a common root. What is their common root? Anybody want to guess what their common root is, Patricia?
Sense of self.
Pat said a sense of self, and that's there, but that's not it. Terry.
Demand.
There is always a demand, but that's not it either. Expectation, that's a form of it too. I'm going to turn over the cards in the interest of time. If I call on Roger and he knows, he ruins the whole thing.
That's what popped in my head was just it's imagination.
Imagination, yes, that's it, but no, you're wrong. Leave. At the root of every one of those moments where we reach the tipping point is the common denominator of something within me instantaneously resisting that moment. Every moment that we call the tipping point is preceded by an insistence that we came into that moment with that we didn't know we came into that moment with. And then you can fill in all the things the students said here, because they are all instances where the moment the image isn't approved, the moment the imagination isn't met, so forth and so on, then there is a summary resistance that rises up in me, because in that moment I am threatened or otherwise challenged by the appearance of that event. But then I blame the tipping point on the event, don't I? Failing to see that there wouldn't be a tipping point, a moment where I suddenly become full of pain. Make the connection, because you don't have psychological pain that isn't preceded by resistance. Resistance is psychological pain that isn't defined yet until the reaction claims it. Resistance is the psychological pain that isn't claimed yet until some reaction defines it. Because there is in resistance a natural form of pain, a spiritual, celestial form of pain. Anytime something is asked to change by something greater than itself, it will resist that which acts upon it. And there is a form of struggle in every form of birth. Do you understand that? So there's no birth without pain. Everybody still tracking? So some form of resistance has come into that moment with me. Agreed? And I'm unable to go past that resistance, because the pain tells me the reason for the resistance I have to the moment is due to something taking place outside of me, beyond my ability to control, or that I have to get in there and fight with, so as to free myself from the condition I blame for the pain, when the condition responsible for the pain isn't the moment at all. The condition responsible for the pain is actually trying to help me understand the pain doesn't exist without resistance that I came into that moment with, that I demand you be the way I want you to be. And you can go through the whole list that we just ran through, and you won't find one of those things that we talked about as the tipping point that isn't preceded by the pressure, the tension of that resistance that insists every moment be as I've imagined it to be. What have we learned? What have we learned? There is something that lives in this consciousness. I use that word loosely because it doesn't really live like we would understand the word live. That goes with us everywhere, into every relationship we have at every moment. That when that moment is met, jumps up and demands, by the pain of its presence in us, that we then act out what we must in order to proceed past that point. But the point should be clear to you that we don't get past that point. Do you get past the pain of all those things that trigger you? Do you? So you're still struggling with it, aren't you? God, don't you want to be free? I'm telling you, you can be a free human being. But the freedom that you seek requires that you start to understand what is the real nature of this pain. Because I don't know the real nature of my pain. You don't know the real nature of your fear. You let pain and fear tell you what the nature is that's producing it. Every time you listen to something in you justify or explain why you're angry or afraid or nervous or stressed, anxious, whatever it may be, every time you listen to those thoughts, you are listening to the consciousness responsible for that torment help you understand how to go around it one more time, every instant. And what is it that's actually, trying to see this, what is it that's actually, when that moment happens, suddenly I reach the tipping point. And boy, isn't it, have you ever noticed you can go from slow, simmer to in a heartbeat, yes or no? We're going to talk about that later in another, I'm going to cover that during our talks in the Pines. The pressure that we think the moment is applying to us is not the moment applying anything. The moment is simply revealing a kettle that is so steamed up and ready to go off that it only takes a certain set of circumstances to trigger it, to reach the tipping point. What is that tipping point? Listen to this. It is the instantaneous memory of a similar moment to that moment you're in. That's the source of the resistance. The source of the resistance is in our identification with this unconscious nature that instantaneously brings up whatever it needs to bring up to validate and justify the fact that now I'm off and running again. How can I be crazed by any of the things we went through unless I have some idea prior to that moment that it shouldn't be that way? Where do I get that idea? It is in the activity, the content of what we would call a memory, conditioned thought. And that conditioned nature goes before us to make sure that any condition similar to what has already been pushed down into it turns us instantaneously into someone who's just reached the tipping point and off I go. Doing what, by the way? This is interesting. Have you ever thought, well, what is it that's actually going on in those moments when suddenly the pain, and it is the pain of the past. See, it feels like it's the pain of the present moment, doesn't it? It's not the pain of the present moment. The present moment is revealing to you the pain of the past within you that has never been reconciled. That's all it's doing. It's saying, look. And why do I say no? It's too painful. I can't possibly be the reason why I explode. Because I've been taught that I'm not an explosive person, and I've learned to be very slow with everything I do so that I never go off. I'm telling you, if you one day you'll be able to study your own mannerisms, your postures, your vocal tones. You'll start seeing how all of this is woven into one more or less chief feature or another that you don't know yet because you're not willing to go beyond the moment where it's being asked, do you want to see? So what happens if pain produces reaction, reaction produces choice, choice seems to produce new action, and then I find out the new action didn't take me past that trigger point, didn't take me past that tipping point, and I'm right back at the tipping point again. What happens is, as I go through that iteration, what happens? Does my life get bigger or smaller? And why does it get smaller? For the rapidity of the tipping point. how much more easily I reach that point where thought starts to run through, negative emotions, anger, disappointment, all that just speeds up and speeds up and speeds up. And if you've ever, there are things that, like for instance, you look at a prop on a plane, when it's standing still, you see 4 or 5 blades, don't you? What happens when that prop reaches maximum speed? You just see one solid object. That's exactly how thought pulls it off. It is accelerated through resistance, and as resistance accelerates, those thoughts that start out very separate, that one day you'll see them as being individual entities that have no connection except for association, you'll start to see how all of that turns into something, listen to this, so solid that it makes me real and makes what I have to do to get past that tipping point absolute necessity. Because if I don't, something terrible is going to happen. And the worst thing that can possibly happen is happening while you're doing that. We getting something from this? So why is it then, I ask, that we don't explore these moments? You've had a lot of pain. We've all, I mean, to be a human being, like Buddha said, to be human is to suffer. A lot of suffering. Why am I still suffering the same thing? John said the fear. I give my attention to it. Why am I still suffering the same fear, the same pain? Why am I still suffering it? Because I haven't learned anything about it. And why haven't I learned anything about it? Look, if you went out and studied a gorilla in the forests in Africa and spent 1 week there, you would know more about gorillas than you do about your own pain. Because you would observe the behavior. I never observed the behavior of the pain, let alone what's producing it. And why don't I? I'm assuming you're allowing me to say this is true, yes? Why don't I? Why am I not there thinking to myself, you know what? I always reach this point with this pain, and when I reach this point, I always pop back or try to pop over or around. When I reach that point, why is that? Why is that? Because the pain's telling me there's no further to go. It's always telling me, go here, go there. It never says, go into it, does it? Go into it with him, go into it with her. Go into the past, go into the future. But it never says, go into it. Pain never says, come on in. It says, get out of here. Get out of here. Yes or no? So if you're following all these questions, and we're doing all right with time, please, I'm going to ask you now to make a transition with me, and then I'm going to show you the possibility of it, because this would be meaningless. You know, you can go anywhere and people tell you, you're this and you're that and you can do this, but if we can't find as above, so below, and find from our life right here on planet Earth, doing what we're doing, if we can't find everything we need to know as below, we'll never understand above. But what I'm asking you to see is that tipping point that we reach all the time. If what I've described to you is true, and that we don't come to that tipping point without coming into the moment pre-conditioned, already carrying with us the content of the past, upon which our identity is more or less firmly established, then if that's true, then that means that everything that I tell myself about my pain has to be a lie. It has to be a lie. Whatever I tell myself, the reason why I'm afraid, it's a lie. Whatever I tell myself about what's wrong with you and why you need to be like that, it's a lie. Anytime I look out at the world and I get all triggered and set off and I reach the tipping point and I'm ready to explode, every last one of those moments is a lie. Not that you aren't and haven't reached that point, but the reason that you've come to that point And until you understand the reason why you are brought to that tipping point, you will never, ever understand how to get beyond it. Because that tipping point never says, go beyond me. It says, avoid me at all costs, doesn't it? Now, you may not hear your anger say, avoid me at all costs. But when you're suddenly flooded with anger or sorrow or grief or some kind of worry about tomorrow, when you're flooded with worry, does that worry say, come on in and let's really take a good look at this? Or does it say, here are all the reasons why you have reached this tipping point, and if you're not careful, you're going to go over the edge, and if you go over the edge, you're dead meat. Yes or no? So the threat to that tipping point is that there's an edge beyond which you must not go. Yes or no? Yes. And I'm telling you that you must go beyond that edge. But now, how do I go beyond that edge? That's the big question, isn't it? Remember, I told you there's going to be parts of you that'll feel pain because of what we're looking at. But please, as best you can, use this discomfort, the tendency to judge yourself, for instance, use it. So let's look at this as above, so below idea. Nice deep breath. I've talked about this a little before, but now I want to bring it into this topic. Now, most of us are a lot like Winston Churchill, who famously, when he was asked, what do you do when the thought comes that you should exercise? He said, I sit down until it passes. I just love that. But on the other hand, if you have half a mind at all, you understand, you have a body. It has teeth, it has hair, it has a heart, it has lungs, it has a system of organic infrastructure. And if you don't take care of the body, let me assure you, if you're not, you are going to regret the day. It is built in. The pain is coming. As you get older, it is impossible to escape the pain of a body beginning to be unable to do what it used to do. And the body will talk to you. It will talk to you. The problem is that when your body talks to you, you think it's you talking. That's the problem. Because the more it talks, the more you fear what it's talking to you about. And that begins at an early age. Why does a person ever get to the point where their body is failing them? Again, you must not judge yourself. I want you to understand that it is possible for you to be released from everything that has held you a captive in the very instant that you see it, and that instant is intended to be every instant of your life. So it doesn't matter where or what status, your position, your psychology, your body is in while you're listening to this. What matters is that you see the truth of it. Why do I summarily dismiss the idea of getting up and going for a walk? Why do I summarily dismiss that? Anybody? See, that's how little pain. And I believe that the feeling of that pain and that resistance is me. I don't understand that it isn't me that has that resistance. It's my body that has that resistance. It doesn't want to move. And when it doesn't want to move, it lets me know it doesn't want to move by telling me, no, I don't feel like it. And it connects to the mind and the emotion, and it builds an entire case, which the system seems infallible. There's no bloody way. I'm going to exercise. I don't feel like it. Who doesn't feel like it? Who doesn't? Your body doesn't feel like it. That's who doesn't feel like it. And you're not your body. You've been given a body so that in its relationship to the principles that I'm pointing out here, you can begin to understand the nature of this resistance. Because now let's flip the coin. If I actually feel that, but I do it anyway, I get up and I start to run, or I lift, or I do whatever I have to do, and I work through that resistance that I met the moment before. You and I both know if you do any exercise at all, there will come a point while you're doing it and it will say, okay, that's pretty much enough. I got out of the chair, I did good. It will start talking to you, and it will talk to you in pain. Resistance, that's how it'll talk to you. But if you understand, or you have a desire in order to keep yourself healthy, or to do something that allows you to do something that you've never done, whatever it may be, you realize, you know what, I feel that resistance, and by God, I can feel the pain. There's no question about it. Because why? Because why does my body resist going through anything that takes it past its stasis? Because when it's taken past its stasis, it's starting to experience itself in a way that it doesn't know what to do with. So as the body's taken past its stasis, it's shouting, no, stop now. I don't know what your body sounds like. That's what mine sounds like. It's a tipping point, isn't it? But if you have enough understanding, you realize I need to take my body past this tipping point, because if I do, and you know this as well, if I do that, I'm going to find myself feeling much better. Why? One of my sayings, on the other side of the resistance is the flow. You should know that if you've ever done it. I don't want to get up and make the list of things that need to be done. I don't want to. All I don't want to belongs to a body of psychological resistance that has taken over and is in control of the system, but that is not meant to be, because we have an understanding that allows us to do what it doesn't want to do. Now, if I do that, I go past that point of the tipping point, the pain. We agreed that, I learned something, I went through something, I saw something. I'm so glad. How many of you ever had, I'm so glad I went through that, yes or no, at any level? Why are you glad that you did that? What does it mean that on the other side of the resistance is the flow? Please, what did I flow into? You're flowing. You weren't flowing before, you were going. What did I flow into on the other side of that pain? I flowed into another body that was already within this body. Now I've moved into a body that's grateful for what it didn't want to do, because it couldn't possibly understand its own resistance. All it knows to do is kowtow to anything that says no. Do you see this with me, yes or no? It's critical. So I go beyond the resistance, and on the other side of that body that must surrender itself to the will that says you will and must go through this, on the other side, I walk into what was waiting for me all along. The realization, the experience of another order of consciousness, another order of physical well-being that was already waiting to be entered into. This is critical that you understand that. I'm going to run out of time. Yes or no? The exact same principle holds true when it comes to any form of psychological pain. See, you have enough experience, conditioned experience in this world to realize that I need to go past this threshold of exercise. I have to, because the body doesn't want to, but I understand what my body doesn't. Yes? So is there another I inside of this consciousness that understands what you don't, your consciousness doesn't. And it's always saying, what's beyond this resistance? What's beyond this pain? Because here I am, you've said something to me, I've read the news, I just saw this thing, and suddenly I'm right at that tipping point, yes or no? And somebody say, no, boy, breathe, do all these nonsensical things that humanity is told to do what? To go around that point. You must understand, and I'll ask you this question. Does the unwanted moment cause our pain, or does our pain create the moment blamed for it? Does the unwanted moment cause our pain, Or does our pain create the moment blamed for it? Which is it? Absolutely. The resistance creates the pain. And the resistance is to the moment that doesn't match what it needs to continue itself as imagined. So that all of that pain is hidden inside of a reincarnating nature that wants to make sure it keeps going. And by the way, keeps going and bringing you into shorter and shorter moments, shorter temper, shorter pain, all that, shorter everything. So that you can then become its servant instead of the other way around, which is you beginning to understand that that moment where you run into that pain, that moment has come and it is saying to you simply this. I wrote it down for you. Where did it go? I don't know where it went. Too bad. But I'll paraphrase it for you. If I go through the pain, then it is mine to gain a new understanding. If I go beyond the pain, I gain, pure and simple. If I don't go beyond the pain, if I don't, and listen to me, don't romanticize this, and for God's sakes, don't blow this up into something that you think, I'm in so much pain, I can't, I'm this and I'm that. And let's make no mistake, we have all, to whatever extent it's true, been run through the mill in every possible meaning of the word. But the task is, if you're following me, and the exercise, if you want to use that word, how do I find out what's beyond the pain? How is it possible? Do you understand now that physically you know something's beyond the pain, right? Why don't I know there's something beyond the psychological pain? The anger, the fear, the worry. Why don't I know? Because I get turned every time it appears. And I get turned because I believe in what it tells me, that this thing, you can't take any more than that. That's what it says. And you have never questioned that. You can't take any more of this. That is the tipping point, isn't it? That's where the aversion, the avoidance, the running, the distraction, the eating, everything connected to the aversion of that moment where something is saying, this is it. No more. Don't push me. I can't. There's too much. There's no way. No. I'm telling you that in that moment, when you reach that particular place, you must agree to ask yourself, I wonder what happens if I dare to bear this pain and see whether or not I can learn something about the source of it. Because if I don't consciously bear the appearance of that pain, I will continue to be someone who lives with pain that I have to bear but never bring an end to it. Never understand it. There's a glorious gift to humanity, to us, and that is that we are created with the capacity to transcend everything that we experience. The capacity to transcend every experience. And in the end, enlightenment might be said to be a human being who has had every experience as infinitely as possible, and they're no longer interested in the sense of self being derived from it. Put up the second key lesson, please, because it outlines what we've been talking about, and it's a good summary of this exercise. Read along with me, please. Just as the threshold of a house is recognized as the entrance into it, so should our pain be seen and understood in a similar light. For its appearance tells the same story, only in spiritual terms. Not only is it a doorway into an increasingly fearless order of consciousness, but it is also an invitation to see through the illusion that running into what feels like some impassable pain does not mean that we have come to the end of that path. Every moment in one way or another represents a place inwardly that we have been drawn to, where outwardly we are invited to understand that place that we have been brought to as revealed by the conditions that stir this consciousness as it does. It is inescapable, the stirring of this consciousness. We are created to transcend its stirring instead of serving the fear that tells us we mustn't go any further into this pain. At some point, and I don't know when it's going to be, I will bring up a very powerful idea that I'm just going to sow into this as we get to the end of this material. I have often mentioned to you that we as human beings are given the infinite capacity for perfect similarity. The infinite capacity for perfect similarity. We experience it when the observer is the observed. When we see something beautiful and we disappear into that beauty. That is the infinite capacity to experience that beauty. Do you understand? You and I have also been given the infinite capacity to suffer. The infinite capacity to have pain. Because just as we have the infinite capacity for similarity when it comes to beauty, where we are transcending ourselves through the marriage of the observer and the observed, so is it true when it comes to this, what we call our psychological pain. We're not intended to be afraid of it. We're intended to understand it so thoroughly that we disappear into the understanding, the light of that understanding. And in that moment, the pain is transcended and it has served its purpose, which is to lead us into a new relationship within ourselves and our own consciousness. Do you understand that with me? So one last little thing, the last key lesson. I don't know if you'll like this or not, but I don't care. Read it out loud. With God as my witness, the only thing we regret in our lives are those moments where we quit on the possibility of discovering the new truth about ourselves. And because we quit on it, and it's incumbent, it is a requirement of the divine to constantly rebalance all of her creations, we will meet that moment again and again and again. There is no getting around it. There is only understanding it, and to understand it, you have to do what? Go into it. Do we have some understanding about this? I hope so. Let's take a break, come back and have our dialogue.
Hello there. Hello there. Welcome back, everyone. Before we get started with our discussion with Guy, just a brief couple of announcements for you. We have some specials going on and some special events coming up, so I want to make sure that you know about those. First of all, a special. This month, we have been offering, in exchange for the donations that you so graciously give us, we have offered a package of special talks. In fact, these are interviews that Guy has given in the past, 3 conversations with Guy Finley. And those MP3 files are available to you immediately if you make a $10 donation or more. And that offer ends tomorrow, so you still have a chance to take advantage of that. So just go to guyfinley.org/package and you can still take advantage of that. The second announcement's about some upcoming events. First of all, this Saturday, Guy is speaking on insighttimer.com/live. He does that every Saturday morning at 8 a.m. So you're invited to join him for that talk and discussion. It's always a good one, attended by a couple of hundred people every Saturday. So you're invited to join him. The topic this Saturday is Look in the Mirror of Life and See the Most Beautiful of All. So that's something we invite you to join us for. And then finally, 1 week from today, Guy is again going to be speaking at a special event. It is a Zoom event sponsored by New Renaissance Bookstore up in Portland. He has been part of this event for several years now, and it's always well attended. It's Thursday, June 8th at 7 p.m., so we just want you to put it on your calendar. The event is sponsored by New Renaissance Bookshop, and again, they are for a small fee of, I think it's $10. You can get the information and link to participate and listen to Guy speak in that Zoom event. So just go to guyfinley.org/ticket, and that will take you, kind of redirect you to New Renaissance's website, and you'll get more information for that. So there you go, a couple of special events and special offers we want you to know about. All right, let's get started with our discussion. And again, this is your opportunity to talk directly to Guy. If you are on the GoToWebinar forum, you can just click your hand and unmute yourself. If you're on Facebook or YouTube, you can send in comments and questions to us and we'll relay them to Guy. Guy, I've been told you have some more comments, so I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you. When I was a boy, back before the turn of the century, I don't know when the T.E. Lawrence book was made into the movie Lawrence of Arabia. It was a long time ago. I was a boy, easily 50, maybe 60 years ago. But I remember when I saw that movie, there was a scene in it. Even whatever I was, 9 or 10, it just stuck in my head. And it wasn't until 60 years later that I began to understand it, what T.E. Lawrence was alluding to when he wrote this scene between Lawrence of Arabia and a general or some colonel by the name of Potter. And if you don't know the movie or the book, it's a masterpiece. It's so nuanced, it's extraordinary. But so there they are, and they're having this conversation about something that happened. Potter says, "It damn well hurts." He's talking about something that happened. I don't remember exactly what it was, some kind of an injury or something like that. Huh?
Yeah, he was putting out the match with his fingers.
Yeah, okay, that's right. He was putting out the match with his fingers, and he said, "It damn well hurts." And Lawrence replied, "Certainly it hurts." And then Potter looked at him askance at Lawrence Arabia and said, "Well, what's the trick?" And this is what stuck with me. Lawrence Arabia said, "It's minding it that hurts." It's minding that hurts. It's minding.
It's pain is in the minding.
The trick is not
The trick is not minding that it hurts. That was the line. I remember I thought, I love that. And then I don't know if you, many years later, this movie Roadhouse with Patrick Swayze, and he was a bouncer and he got hurt and he was in the hospital meeting his future love affair without knowing it, this beautiful doctor. And she says, I need to stitch you up. I'm going to give you some Novocaine. And he says, I don't want any Novocaine. And she said, you must like pain. And he says, pain don't hurt. Now, it can be taken, both of those things, at so many levels, mind over matter and all that nonsense, but it isn't mind over matter. It's the ability to have my own attention. As goes my attention, so comes my experience. And if the root of this psychological pain and everything that follows in the wake of it is resistance, why did the man not go to the doctor? Did he know there was going to be pain, or was he resisting the image, a memory of his own? And the more he resisted the image, the greater the pain, the more the wish to avoid the doctor. The more you try to avoid the pain, the more pain you will be in. And the more it will linger. It's not the pain that's the problem. We blame the condition. To understand the condition is not apart from the consciousness that creates it, allows me to start using my attention in a different way. I can be more interested in the lesson once I understand the necessity of it, if I want to be able to go beyond that pain. And now, open it up to you, John, Kate. Let's go and see what we got.
All right. We have several written questions and one person in the queue right now, guys. So I'll start with a written question that was left over from Sunday's talk.
Okay.
This came in from Rebecca. Rebecca says, she just wanted any thoughts you have on the following. I allow this consciousness to get confounded due to childhood and past experiences and what our biology does to protect us, particularly as children. With these wisdom talks, I have more awareness around my body, letting go of these traumas rather than allowing them to keep me in a woe is me stuckness, for I am being made anew each moment. So I guess you just wanted a response, a reaction.
She's affirming the lessons that she's learning. Nothing wrong with that, nothing but good in that. On we go.
All right, on we go then. I will go next to Robert in the queue. Let's hear from him. Hello, Robert. Oops, Robert, I think you lowered your hand. Did you wish to speak to Guy? Just unmute yourself if you do. Okay, I guess not. So I'll go next to a written question. And Robert, again, if you wish to speak to Guy, just raise your hand again. This guy is a second written question left over from Sunday. It came in from Don. Don said, Guy, do you have further tips to help us discern the difference between the ideas that come from the mind and those that come from the divine?
When you have an intuition, it doesn't come in the form of an idea. When you have an insight into something, there's no idea that comes before you to tell you the nature of what you have just seen into. Your relationship with the divine, at whatever level it may be, and there is every possible mansion in the kingdom, is inseparable from the clarity in which you see the moment, your relationship to it, and what it's revealing to you about it. And there are no words in that. Words muck everything up. Not that there's anything wrong with wanting to clarify the revelation, for the purpose of instructing the intellect and giving it something that it can have as an anchor for itself, that maybe downstream you'll be able to realize has helped you understand something. But at some point, there will come a point in your development where you will no longer look to, hope for an idea. I don't know how many years ago it was. I was writing music I don't know whether I was on Motown or RCA at the time. I wrote a song. And one of the lyrics was, who am I? What's my purpose? What's the plan? And the bridge went, gentle inspirations, I want no part of you. Give me revelations. Let me know what I must do. Inspiration is beautiful, but it's not in thought. Nor is revelation in thought. Revelation is the moment in which the observer and the observed, the understanding and the self that is one with that understanding, is a singularity. And there are no words that can describe, other than just limit, what happens when the momentary marriage of observer and observed takes place. That emptiness is as full as it is empty. So Don, don't be deceived into thinking that you're waiting for some word from God. Your heart has never been separated from the divine. It is in constant communication with the possibilities that the divine has in mind through the revelations it brings, if you'll accept them. Let's go on, John.
All right, Robert has raised his hand in the queue, so we'll give him a try again. Hello, Robert.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Oh, good. Technology, always gives you something to work with, doesn't it?
Oh, yes, it does.
I think there's a slight delay since I'm from Virginia here. Always appreciate the new perspective your talks bring. And in particular, your fear goes wherever you go. It's a great perspective, something to hang on to for the next few days, if not longer. When you were speaking, one of the things that came to mind was during the 70s, there was a profusion of books on coping and coping techniques.
Yes.
And people were inundated by this. And even at that point, I realized this is an escape. It's not a solution.
Correct.
Just like belief is an escape,
Correct.
not a solution. And it wasn't for another 5 or 10 years that I ran across something that was true, which was something along the line of do what you don't want to do, or in another way, if you take the easy path, you end up with the hard life. If you take the hard path, you end up with the easy life.
Yes. Yes. That's the task. It's never ending, because there's no moment where this level of consciousness, even as it is reborn, isn't reborn into a form that will resist its next rebirth. It's just part of the process. Thank you, Robert.
All right, we'll go next. I have a couple of written questions, Guy. So here is one that came in this evening from Kathleen. Kathleen asks, isn't our fear and discomfort our conditioning? And can we just recognize that and just put it to one side, like taking off a heavy coat?
Well, when you manage that, you come and teach this class. If it was as simple as recognizing that my conditioning, as I said in the talk, that I walk around as the instrument of an almost endless series of dreams, one weaving itself into the next, so that I'm conditioned to find myself not just through the reactions that are generated when this dream runs into reality, but to then trying to figure out how to have a new dream and get around it. And it is a dream, Kathleen. that I can simply take this coat off anytime I want to. First, you must understand and see as clearly as possible that until you recognize that the coat that's on, this coating of thoughts and feelings, isn't you, you didn't put it there, but that you came into a consciousness replete with an entire closet of those coats, you'll never be able to struggle properly with it. Because the struggle isn't, listen to me, the struggle isn't to take the coat off. The struggle is to see that something keeps putting it on and is uncomfortable without it. That's what I have to enter into if I want to go beyond this unending mantle of miserable clothing that I'm dressed in. And you can just see, I don't know if I expressed it accurately enough. I'm not telling you to be some David who's going to go out and slay Goliath. Do you think for a moment that David knew he would slay Goliath? Or was he trembling as he even considered the possibility? Your task isn't to slay anything, it's just to meet whatever happens. You keep wanting to slay things. How can you slay a fear that your own mind creates without creating the mind again in the image of that fear? It is impossible. But can I meet this moment where fear is telling me I can't, I won't, I'm not going to get through it, this is impossible. I'm too this, I'm too that, look at me, I'm this. Can I meet that moment and just understand that I am standing before a giant? But a giant whose only authority is that I have fallen to my knees every time it appears instead of gathering myself and agreeing to meet it. Because if I'll agree to meet it, if I go out into the field of that battle, much like Arjuna was instructed to by Krishna, I'll find out for myself. I'll see for myself. I learned something here. And when you learn something about that giant of fear, worry, despair, when you learn something about it, that giant shrinks that much. Every time that you learn something about that giant of pain, it shrinks a little bit. And you know why it shrinks? Because it loses some of its reality. It loses some of its reality because you're no longer defined by your fear of it. On we go, John.
All right, Guy, our queue is wide open. So again, I invite people out online to join us, and students in the room, if you'd like to speak, now would be a good time. I do have a written question that came in from Susanna, and she says, we try to get someone's attention to get some approval. It is exhausting. In order to avoid being ignored and left alone, what to do? What a conundrum. What a lifetime predicament. I've ruined my life trying to do this.
And now it ends. And now it ends. And now ends my fawning. Why? Because I'm aware of the pain in it instead of the promise of being approved. And now ends my impatience. Why? Because I've seen it do nothing but damage to everyone, including myself. And now ends my regret. Why? Because I understand going into the pain of it is useless. All it does is recreate a self that's still caught in the same loop. I know you're fairly sharp, Susanna. Use that leading edge of your intellect to cut into these moments and see more clearly the cause of them. Then you won't be caught in the regret that seems unending, because the pain of the past seems unending. The pain of the past lasts only as long as I agree to give my attention to it. Anything else, John?
Yes, Guy. Susanna sent in a second question during your talk. It was a short one. She asks, there's no birth without pain?
Exactly. I watched some short video, I don't know when it was, yesterday, the day before yesterday, somebody sent it to me. It was 13 minutes of watching this beautiful mare give birth to a foal, and her loving friends, aka owners, their willingness to share in that moment the pain they shared with that creature as it was kind of stuck in the what's that called? No, I know it's a birth canal. No, labor. Thank you. Gosh. You have any question about the pain of that moment? What about when that little foal comes out, or when you came out and you opened your eyes and went, "Oh my God, what? Let me back, put me back in." Why do you think it cries? Because it's happy? It's a shock. It had one system, now it's been thrown into another. The thing to understand, Susanna, is that the pain of birth is the promise of entering into an unending creation. Every creation comes forth from pain. The pain of every creation gives rise to the birth of the next creation. That's who you are. That's what you are. And you can live that. You can live that. You're meant to live that. If you want to know what enlightenment is, it's living that. Now the task is, am I willing to go beyond the resistance I feel in the moment when that pain comes up? Most of us don't even recognize that's pain. Honest to God, most of us don't recognize it's pain. Phone rings, the disturbance. You think you don't want it to ring because you're busy. No, you don't want it to ring because there's an instantaneous pain born of resisting whatever it is that's known, or interrupting with your piece of pizza, the piece of watching that program. Littlest things. You're talking to somebody and they interrupt you. We all know what that's like. We all do it all the time to each other. Someone interrupts you. They know what you're going to say. In that moment, there's pain. That's why that tipping point is reached, where you want to either shut down or blame the other person and then bring their whole past into your life so it proves to you that you know what they're like. You're not proving that you know what they're like. You're proving that you don't understand the nature of that pain. That's all. And if you want to understand it, what do you have to do? Go into it. Go beyond it. Let it teach you. Ask it to teach you. You can do that, can't you? I know you can. Is that it, John?
Yes, Guy, that's all I have. So I think that's a wrap for tonight.
All right, almost. Come on, Wayne. Wayne was hopping around back there on 2 feet. Me, boss. Me, boss.
Hi, everyone. My name's Wayne. I'm always so grateful for this work because of what I've been learning. Because I've always wondered about my father's his own demise, and this work. I'm talking about his. He never really understood pain, and the pain that he was in from World War II, and my own understanding is that what he was doing was resisting pain through negative imagination, and it only grew in himself to where I would think he just identified with it so much that he could not handle it anymore, and he took his own life. So, because I've always wanted to understand that.
Or took it out on you or anyone else.
Correct.
I mean, don't you wonder why it is that you can be so unkind to people? You always have a reason for being unkind, a reason for being inconsiderate, a reason for considering yourself first and always. All of that's pain, but not recognized as such. Now you starting to understand yourself, you begin to understand your Father.
Yes.
And in understanding your Father, it isn't necessary to forgive him because you understand, just like you, he could not do otherwise. As you learn to do otherwise because of your new understanding, your Father is helped. You will see that.
Yes. There's I guess a saying is this: the sins of the father is given to the son upon 7 generations.
Yes.
That's only if we don't understand it.
And the sins of the father not being some moral ineptitude, the sins of the father being missing the mark, missing the understanding of the purpose of this life and the pain in it.
Yes.
Yes.
Yep. Thank you, Guy.
Good night, everybody. Do your work.